Welcome, everyone. I'm Greg Wasserman, Head of Relationships for RSS.com, and this is the November free training with RSS.com. And today we're going to be talking about all things legal. If you are here with the recording or live, thank you for tuning in. You are in for a great event as we sit down with Gordon Firemark, who's been doing this for 30 years. He's the podcast lawyer, and we're going to provide a slew of information regarding what it means to think about your podcast from a legal standpoint. Because I can tell you, the reason I brought Gordon in is I saw him speak at Podcast Movement, and he was bringing in a bunch of little tidbits. I'm like, I had no clue about that. So if I have no clue and I've been doing this for about 5 years, I can imagine many people are probably in the same boat that may be starting or like myself have been doing this for a bit. So with no further ado, let's bring in our guest here, Gordon Firemark. Gordon, great to have you.
Hey, Greg. Great to be here. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So I guess the first thing is tell us a little bit about, give me your mission, let people know a little bit about yourself.
So as you said, people call me the podcast lawyer, and that is because I've been practicing entertainment, media, business, and intellectual property law for, 33 years now. And I'm a podcaster myself. And so when I started my show coming up on 17 years ago now, I went looking for legal, doing the due diligence as a lawyer myself. I decided to investigate the resources and figure out what I needed to know about the law specifically for podcasters. And what I found was there weren't any resources. So I ended up sitting down and doing some research and identifying the areas where podcasting is different from film and television and music and all those things, and how everything sort of overlaps and wraps around each other. And that turned into a book. And when you write a book on a subject, you become an instant expert, I guess I could say. That book is called The Podcast Blog and New Media Producers Legal Survival Guide, or just Podcast Law Book for short. And it's still the book on the subject. So
Oh, wow.
It's nice to be recognized as the author and as the expert of that kind of thing.
Well, there you go. Now you know, everyone, we've got the expert here. So I guess if we dive into it, the first question is always going to be around contracts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do I need to create a contract with my co-host? Do I need to create a contract for my guest? I mean, that was ultimately the question that started this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Is your point about if I bring a guest onto my show, and even though I've sent them an email saying, "Hey, be a guest on my show,"
Mm-hmm.
and they say, "Yes, I want to be a guest on your show," they've booked time to be on and record. That doesn't actually mean that I have the right to the conversation and do whatever I want with it. And they could ask to have it pulled. So let's start there. Educate me on what did I get wrong.
Well, you didn't get anything wrong. It's just that you didn't take things quite far enough in the discussion. So the issue is this, that yes, there's this implied consent to be recorded when we show up to, sit in front of a microphone and a camera and do an episode. But the question is, what's the full scope of that consent? What can you do with that recording? What can't you do? It may not even include the right to publish it online. I mean, it's sort of implicit that that's what podcasting is. But, there could be an argument. Well, I didn't know you were going to cut it up this way. I didn't know you were going to do this. I didn't know you were going to present me that way, or that you were going to have other people on the show, that it was only going to be one segment. So that consent, when it's just implied from conduct, well, I think it's also revocable. And it's also, again, the scope, the definition of what's allowed is ambiguous. So that's why I've been on a crusade for a number of years now to get every podcaster who has guests on their show to have those guests sign a release agreement. And that release is formal written consent to be recorded, to have it published, to have it edited, to have AI used to maybe take out noise and those kinds of things. The release that I promote, podcastrelease.com, includes that AI language, and just sort of the caveat that you can't use the AI to change the meaning or the sound of the person's voice, just just to sort of clean things up. And which I think is the way most of us would plan to use an AI tool anyway. So not too big of a stretch. The repurposing is another area where, maybe after a few hundred episodes, you decide you've got enough to compile a book based on the interviews of people that you've talked to. So you want to be able to do that without having that guest from 5 years ago come out and with hand extended saying, "Hey, where's my piece of the action?" Those kinds of things. Or, yeah, the takedown, or this is one of the worst things that I see is the host shares a copy of the footage with the guest, and the guest then edits it or has their team edit it. And all of a sudden, there's no host anywhere to be found, and the title of the show is nowhere. But okay, on that host, on the guest's Instagram, there's all this content, and it makes it look like it's theirs. So as a host of a show, as a producer of a show, we want to own what we've created and we've put our time, energy, and money and resources into. So the ownership questions become a thing as well. And so all of that is what goes into a proper podcast guest release.
You heard it. I mean, I would never have thought about that until I heard that from you, and that's
Mm,
why it's great to have everyone hearing this now. So, I actually went to your website and I got that form.
yeah.
So then anyone that's listening, go to what's the website again?
Podcastrelease.com.
There we go. Easy. You've heard it.
Mhm.
And if I just take the exact form you've got,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
You've set it up so that there's very little that a person needs to do besides
Yeah.
that.
What I generally recommend is just to streamline and make the process as friction free as possible. Is if you're using a tool like Calendly or Acuity Scheduling or one of those to book your guests, to have your guests choose a time, build the form into that process so that they just, as they're going through, they're checking boxes, they're typing in their information. And then at the end, they've got a box that says, "I agree to the terms that are laid out above." And that's enough for this kind of a contract.
So not only is Gordon dropping in the legal advice here, he's helping you with your strategies and your systems. So take that tidbit, write that one down as well. I
Yeah,
love it.
contracts are only valid and good if people will actually sign them. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to sign it. I don't want to say without thinking about it, but you know, uh, we click through click wrap agreements all the time as we sign up for new services online. So it becomes sort of natural to
Yeah.
check the box and type your name. So
All right. So you've got the guest released.
mhm.
We've also talked about having other contracts. I think
Yeah,
you've mentioned to me, you should have a contract with anyone that you're doing business with.
yeah.
So who else are we missing here that a podcaster should be thinking about having a contract with?
So my principle is that anybody who touches your podcast in any way, shape, or form should be signed to a written contract or an online contract of some sort that articulates the rights and responsibilities of the parties. Who owns what? Who gets what? What do you get to do with it? Same questions. I sometimes refer to this as a podcast prenup. Certainly, if it's a co-host or a co-producer, you want to know, hey, if things don't go well, who gets the house and kids, right? The audience, that RSS feed is the kids, essentially. And the contents of the show is the house, right? All those assets. So you want to anticipate the possibility that there's going to be some kind of a breakup down the line and try to address that. Plus, just giving clarity to, how are we splitting revenues? How are we sharing expenses? Whose job is what in this whole mix? So, co host agreements, co producer agreements. If you're hiring an editor, that editor should sign a contract that says the results and proceeds of what I'm doing as an editor will belong to you, the company or the producer, as a work made for hire. And that's sort of magic language, but you have to be careful about how you throw it in there because here's the thing: when two or more people, well, excuse me, when one person who's an independent contractor creates something original, creative work, that's copyrightable. And contrary to what we might think is, how I'm paying for them to do this work, so therefore I own what they created. That's not how the law works. Under copyright law, an independent contractor creates something, they own the copyright unless they're an employee where there's full on payroll and all that, or there's a written contract specifying that it's a work made for hire that will belong to the employer in this scenario.
So in this case, I guess it depends, but do you normally see me as the podcaster sending the contract to the editor or producer,
Mhm.
or should I be expecting whoever I'm hiring as the editor producer, they would have a contract that I'd be signing as part of that work? Is it who do I typically see as
Yeah.
the person responsible here?
I think it's always better to be in control of the terms of the contract if you can be. Now, that's not to say you wouldn't negotiate. If the editor sends over their contract, you could always ask them, "Hey, include this language, include a provision that says that." But it's a good idea to just have a template in mind so you know what language you're asking for. My experience is that a lot of these freelancers who do this kind of work, they don't even know that what I was just telling you about the contractor owning the stuff, and so they wouldn't think to include those kinds of terms in the contract, or they're trying to get away with not including it. So you have to be critical and think about it. So it doesn't really matter whose contract form it is, as long as it includes the right stuff. And that's the nature of negotiation: is have the conversation, talk it out beforehand, so there's no misunderstandings or hard feelings later on.
So you've created a great resource for guesting. Have you also created all these other resources for, as you just said, for the editor and producer, for my co-host, or is that where I'm turning to Gordon, going, "Hey, Gordon, I need you to help write this up for me."
Well, either or. So yes, the podcast guest release at podcastrelease.com is my free lead magnet that gets people into my ecosystem and hearing from me with some frequency. Um,
It's good content,
but
everyone. I do it. I get it.
yeah, but I do have forms and templates for lots of the other kinds of things that podcasters and online entrepreneurs encounter. Podcastlawforms.com is my store where I offer those things for sale. They're all fairly low priced. It's pretty easy, low cost kinds of things. But if you have a co host arrangement, you want a co host agreement, you can find one there. If you're co producing a show where you're going to share ownership of the thing, there's an agreement form for that. Um, your website terms and privacy policy and those kinds of things, we've got templates for those things as well. So really, podcastlawforms.com or easylegaltemplates.com for the stuff that's not directly podcast related.
Perfect. Thanks for that. All right, so let's
Mhm.
change tunes here. And the
Yep.
next side is branding, right? Like,
Mhm.
do I need um do I need a trademark? I mean, if we think about most of us that are starting a podcast, I would love to make it my full-time job. I would love to
Yeah.
make money on this, but in a sense, it's kind of a hobby right now.
Sure.
When do I cross the barrier of going, you know what? I'm going to trademark my brand. I'm going to trademark everything. I'm going to spend money right now, even more
Yeah.
upfront to do that, as opposed to most. You know what? I'm worried about even starting and hitting
Mhm.
play, and we've heard that plenty of times, is you're
Sure.
overthinking it. Just record and start getting
Yeah.
out there. But we're talking on the legal side, so where does
Yeah.
that fit into it?
So, great question, and the answer, like most lawyers will give to a lot of questions about do I need a trademark, do I need this, is it depends. So sorry about that, but this is one of those where it really does. If the title you've chosen for your podcast is really distinctive and significant as a brand name, that is, people will identify it as you are the source from which this content is coming, then that's a valuable thing. That's trademark. Trademark is a word, a symbol, a phrase, a logo, whatever, some kind of an indicator of source or origin that is affixed to goods or services. So you give a title to a podcast, that's you're attaching it to those to the entertainment or information service. So do you need a podcast? If it's distinctive enough to qualify, then yes, you can get a trademark registered to protect against other people entering the marketplace and using confusingly similar titles, right? So the question to ask is, would it hurt if somebody else came along and started a show with the same or very similar name as mine? And if the answer to that is yes, then it's time to consider a trademark registration. It's not cheap, it's not tremendously expensive, but it's an investment in the show. So you have to ask yourself, is this worth an investment of a couple of $1,000 to protect against that possibility that there will be confusingly similar titles and shows out there?
I like
And
that
if
you
so,
say investment, right? Because like
yeah.
we're always trying to tell you, look, you invest in your podcast, you're investing in you hosting with rss.com. There's an investment in your host. You're investing in the tools and the platforms you're using because you're
Right.
looking at this and treating it like a business.
Yeah.
And that is going to separate you from someone who's not. So that is a good point.
We are all paying for services like rss.com, StreamYard or Ecamm in the case of this live stream, those kinds of tools. And we pay for things like our microphone. I mean, we all are sitting on this call with probably thousands of dollars worth of gear to make it possible for us to record audio, to record video, to light us ourselves, and decorations in the background and all of that kind of stuff. Isn't it worth spending that kind of similar money, not extraordinary money, but a couple of $1,000 to protect against these kinds of interlopers coming in with names that are confusing to the audience? And nowadays, with the AI stuff happening, I think we're going to see more and more and more shows on similar topics that adopt similar sounding names and brands, and it's something we have to think about.
So, from that standpoint, if you've gotten your show and it's been around for a bit,
Hmm.
and you didn't go down the process of trademarking, and then someone else came out and released the show, and they decided to trademark it,
Yep.
are you,
Have you
yeah.
you've heard my story already? I'm going to tell the story.
Okay.
Okay. So the short answer is that the way trademark law works is first to adopt the brand and use it in interstate commerce is entitled to own and claim the trademark. But without registration, it's very hard to prove that you were there first and that that you are entitled to sue or have an injunction or restraining order, those kinds of things. The story that I'll tell is about a very prolific podcaster who was there sort of in the earliest days and one of the OGs in the podcasting space, who has a really cool title that uses a kind of a buzzword that causes a sort of triple entendre kind of a meaning in the space. And he launched his show, 17 years ago now, something like that. He was actually one of the people I followed when I was trying to learn how to podcast myself. And so he came to me maybe 4 years ago now and said, I want to register the title for my show. It's been too long. I just need to get it going. And okay, great. So we get the process started. I run a search, and sure enough, I find that there's a new outfit that hasn't even launched a podcast yet, but they've reserved the name by registering their trademark, which has the same buzzword in it, very similar sounding names, definitely the same commercial impression. And so we submitted our application for registration, but theirs is already in the works. And so before we were really able to file an opposition of their trademark or anything like that, theirs was approved. And that meant that my client's application was blocked as long as they were still sort of pending. And their application is approved, but they haven't actually started using it yet. So it's an intent to use trademark. And that means that once they provide proof that they've put it into commerce, they can get their trademark registered. So meanwhile, we're waiting to see what's happening because we still had some aces up our sleeve, and we were able to file a lawsuit to cancel the trademark registration once it was registered. But we're in limbo while they haven't launched. So anyway, so that means a lawsuit and expenses and all that. We are waiting, and every 6 months they keep extending their time to file this proof until finally they got out to 3.5 years or something like that, and the trademark office said, that's it, you're done, no more extensions, it's abandoned. So took almost 4 years for the application that we filed to actually get approved, and now he's got the trademark and everything's good, but
But during that
shouldn't
limbo
have happened though.
period, you
Yeah.
kept producing, you kept creating, or you had to stop?
Well, actually, no, we didn't have to stop because he was there first. So legally, he
Okay.
had a right to keep using it. But we didn't have a right to stop them from using it and causing that confusion in the marketplace. And fortunately, they never launched a show, so we didn't actually have the problem of the real confusion. But it could have been a problem, especially if they had launched it in a big way and put some real money behind it and things. So this all because he waited. He didn't set up his protections early on in the process, and as a result we ended up having this extra friction, extra trouble in the process. But all's well that ends well.
There you go. So make
Oh,
sure
oh,
you
but a lot of expense associated with it too,
yeah.
right? I mean, he's paying me to deal with this for every 6 months for 3.5 years. So,
So once again, if you plan better, if you want to make this an
mhm,
investment, that is something you definitely should be looking at. Avoid the legal fees there
yeah,
later, right? Dealing with like back issues. It's like, all right, I need a better
mhm.
chair. It's like, well, I'm not going to spend the $200 to get a better chair, but then my back starts hurting and now I'm spending
Next year,
God
you're
knows
going
how
to the
much money.
orthopedist.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
uh, there's a question here that I saw in the chat that I missed, and I
Mhm.
want to come back to from our interview. If you
Okay.
run an interview based podcast and have already begun publishing that show,
Yeah.
can you go back to your guests and go, hey, I'm sorry, I've got it? And I know I've had this recently. A show that I was on, they've updated their contract. So they
Mhm.
send it to me to say, please sign. But this is now an instance where I haven't signed anything. And now the host is coming to me saying, oh, I would love for you to do this. What had happens in that situation?
Well, I mean, it's fine to do that. It's fine to go back and ask them for a signature after the fact. But I would say the more time that has passed, the less likely that person is going to actually sign because they just don't want to be bothered with it, right? That said, I don't generally recommend going back for old episode guests unless you have a concrete plan to start repurposing and remonetizing that content in a different medium. And I'm not saying, putting your show from years ago back now on YouTube or something, but I'm saying if you decided to put a book together or put it behind a paywall inside an online course or those kinds of things, that's when you really need the consent because there's money involved, there's opportunities for trouble to come up. So, you want to, I guess I would say, let's triage that problem. Let's decide whether or not it's bad enough to bother going
I don't know.
back.
When I think about it, when I think about this question and listening to you talk,
Mhm.
it's like imagine 3 years from now, a guest I had on my show, they were small time at that point, but 3 years from
Mhm.
now, who know? Maybe they blow up, they're in the news
Now they're running
and
for president.
running right? Running for office, right? So,
Uh,
they may be going, "Alright, we gotta get everywhere that you've spoken, we need to have it pulled
uh-huh.
down." So, in
Right.
some regards, it makes sense to just be
Mhm.
proactive and go, "You know what? I don't know who this person is gonna be." And this is my
Yeah.
motto, life is about time and relationships. You've no clue where
Mhm.
anything's gonna take you. If I did, I would have a crystal ball and we'd probably not be having this conversation, but it might be worth it to just have it. And but as you said, they may not sign it because it's like, look, it's been 6 months, it's been two
Yeah.
years, I'm not signing this, but like it's really just gonna come down to no
Mhm.
harm, no foul. And if they say no, I'm not signing it, then you just know I'm not gonna be able to
Yeah.
do additional stuff with that in the future,
Right.
but at least I've got it.
And we're still sort of relying on that implied consent to something, and then if it comes down to it, we can duke it out in court over what they actually consented to, and just ask the jury or the judge to be a reasonable person and inject themselves into that situation and say, "This is what I think it means." That's not as good as a written contract, but it's okay. Yeah, and the fact of it is, the intervening time is going to lead to people feeling like, well, now I have to read and understand this thing. And there are always going to be people who won't sign your release agreement. And to that, I say, they think highly enough of themselves, or their agents and lawyers think highly enough of them that they don't think they should have to sign something to get the media coverage. And maybe they're right. But we should make an informed decision about whether or not we're going to have them on the show if they haven't signed that release. So my experience is that the folks who put up roadblocks and object to signing a release, they're the ones that turn out to be trouble all the way down the line. Either they've got to, they come back with editing notes and well, you got to cut that out and you got to change this, or they're the one who comes and says, no, you better just take that down. I know you invested your resources in making this episode, but too bad, take it down. And what's worse is if you've got sponsors of the show that are paying for that episode to be up and live, and you take it down because you had a demand from an unhappy guest, well, now you're breaching the contract with the sponsor. So it's a danger zone. So that if you're going to be monetizing your show, especially, having those contracts with everybody in contact, including the guests, including the co-hosts, the producers, the editors, everybody, it really matters.
There you go. All right. So planning ahead is a key one. Gordon's
Mhm.
already given us some systems that how do we operate that into our calendlies and
Yeah.
calendar booking options.
Mhm.
Anything else that I'm missing on the branding side from a legal standpoint?
Well, I think the branding is you have to be consistent about it. So, the trademark protection comes from adopting the brand that you choose. And, trademark and brand are sort of synonyms. I mean, after all, when I said that what's a trademark? It's a distinctive word, phrase, or symbol that is affixed to the goods to indicate where they came from. Well, what was it we used to do with cows where we'd sear a symbol into the hide of the cow? And what was that called? Branding.
Okay.
So we're applying a brand to the goods to tell what ranch it came from. Same exact thing here. So adopt a good distinctive mark and use it consistently. That means don't put the in front of it some of the time, but not all of the time. Don't change the wording of things or the way it's stacked, or the more you can do to be consistent, the better in that arena. And that's really just about being identified the same every time.
Amazing. All right. So the next one, if you brought up monetization and sponsors,
Yeah.
what do I got to know from from the monetization from a affiliates? That becomes, I mean, RSS.com. We've got the ability
Mhm.
to use paid, so your programmatic ads that are interested in there. But
Yeah.
also, I want to make money. I'm either like yourself promoting my goods, or I am getting paid by someone to promote it. What do I have to do from a legal standpoint within my podcast to let people know that I'm getting paid for whatever the service
Sure.
is?
Yeah. Well, all of what we're talking about here is really just about professionalism, injecting a dose of professionalism into what we're doing so that we're best positioned to monetize and to grow our audience and influence and all that. Um, when it comes to advertisements in your show, it needs to be pretty clear that what the person is hearing is now an ad. Sometimes that's a host doing a host read, just saying, "Okay, we got to pay the bills, so let me tell you about Casper mattresses or whatever it is." You're welcome, Casper. You just got a plug. Um, so that's one way of doing it. Another would be to have some kind of a sound effect or a segment divider that lets people know, okay, what's coming next is different content. When you're doing affiliate ads, or if you're doing a show that you do unboxings or product reviews and things like that, there's a lot of disclosure that's required. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission here in the States, is the consumer protection agency responsible for looking at false and misleading advertisements. And they consider that an endorsement is a kind of advertisement. So if I'm talking about a product that I like and I've been compensated for reviewing it or saying what I say about it, then the audience has a right to know, because after all, they should make an informed decision to buy. Maybe they trust my word, but maybe they won't if they know that, well, Casper Mattresses paid me a bunch of money to say what I said, which they didn't, by the way. I'll just be transparent about that. Likewise, if you have a guest who's paid to come on the show, pay to play, it's a thing. Doesn't the audience have a right to know that this guy who just wrote a book about alternative medicine, um, and is trying to sell the book, that he, paid me 10,000 bucks to come on my podcast and talk about it? I think the audience has a right to know. So clear and conspicuous disclosure of any kind of beneficial relationship, whether it's payment or they send you free goods or whatever. Maybe you're getting a commission, an affiliate transaction. We've all heard those disclosures before. There's one guy who does a great job of it, who just says, I've got links to these things in my show notes, and if you use one of them, I will get paid a little bit. It won't cost you anything else. So thank you very much for using my link. That's all you have to say. And I think that complies with Amazon's rules in particular. They're strict about it, but the FTC can be pretty strict too. So
Do I have to say
disclose,
it?
disclose.
So does disclosure have to be in so you know what? I've got if I'm thinking about podcasts, there's a couple ways,
Mhm.
right? So I've got a bing, a ding, or whatever, a noise going like, all right, it's going to be a commercial, which from a user standpoint, I'm going to
Yeah.
skip because I'm like, oh, you've already kind of
Mhm.
prepped me here, but I'm going to skip it there.
Right.
So where's the fine line of creating content, but also that legal piece? Do I need to put that ding in there, knowing that a user is probably going to skip my ad now, or can I just weave my way and going like, you know what? My back is hurting. I always are talking about this, like my back was hurting. I
Mhm.
could use a good mattress right now and yada, yada,
Right.
yada, yada, right? Go use
Yeah.
my link, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
Is it implied then that I'm getting compensated because I put in there? Or do I have to verbally put it into, hey,
Yeah.
I'm getting paid for this? Or does it just have to be in my show notes in the episode? And I don't have to actually verbally say it on the episode. I'm good enough if it's in the episode description, letting you know Gordon was paid for his time coming on this show. Casper's paying me if you click on this or you buy it. Or I'm getting paid directly by brand X, not from an affiliate standpoint, but they're just paying me a straight CPM, which is completely different than an affiliate standpoint. So there's a lot of nuances there. Walk me through that.
Yeah. So we shouldn't assume that our audience is picking up on those subtle cues. Okay. We should all, what the rule requires is clear, conspicuous, adjacent disclosure. And that means that when you say the message that you have to disclose about, you put the disclosure right next to it. And it needs to be as big and bold and loud as the statement itself, the disclosure. And it shouldn't be easy for your audience to miss it. I mean, of course, if they're skipping around, they're gonna jump over things. But clear, conspicuous, adjacent. Those are the rules, and you see it on Instagram, you see it on Twitter, and what's the other one? TikTok, where you'll see hashtag ad or hashtag paid or something like that.
But that's
That's that
different because it's
disclosure.
visual versus
Right.
auditory. So
Right. So with podcasts, if you're doing an audio only podcast, then it needs to be an audible disclosure. But
okay.
if you're doing show notes, then it should also be in the show notes right next to that link. You can just say paid affiliate link, something like that. And if it's visual, if you're doing a video show, then you may even, especially if you're showing the product, you may even want to put up a disclosure on the screen. Say it out loud if you can, but it may make sense just to have, paid promotion or something like that come on the screen. Um, and it's always a fine line because we don't want to be perceived as overly commercial. But
Or
we
we don't
all
wanna
grew up
give a
watching
person a reason
television.
to skip, going like, "Alright, and
Right,
now a word from our sponsors." It's
right.
like, "Well, legally, I had to put that, but now I know you're gonna skip the ad because."
Do you though? Because I think that good shows with good hosts, when they say, okay, time to pay the bills, this show is brought to you by, I don't think everybody skips through it because they know it's going to be 15 seconds and then we're back to the meat of the show. If you are respecting your audience, and honestly, giving these disclosures is a form of showing respect to the audience's intelligence and their rights. Uh, I think audiences will stick around for a little bit of that. Now, if you're going to say, "Well, let's pay the bills," so here's 7 minutes of ads, which we've all heard those shows, right? Then you deserve to have it skipped over the whole show. So yeah, so I think that's the watchword is be professional and show the appropriate respect to your audience and your guests and everybody else.
So there you go. You could either do it at the beginning and try have the trust with your audience that they're not gonna be skipped, or as long as you've got it in there going like, "Let's talk about my back," and,
Yeah,
this was this little segment was brought to you by sponsor X or however you wanna do it, but as long as you're
yeah.
letting people know, there's ways to do that.
Well, and another component of this is truthfulness. So if you and I are talking and you talking about your back pain, and I say, ever since I got my Casper mattress, I'm sleeping better. I'm waking up feeling better in the morning. I don't have the back pain and the neck pain that I used to have. Da 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 da. Then I better actually use a Casper mattress, right? And if not, then I should say, I haven't tried it, but I hear great things about this mattress or that nutritional supplement or whatever it is. Um, so it needs to be truthful and it needs to be transparent. So they paid me to mention this product. That's a little overt actually, but you know, Casper is one of our sponsors of this show, and we're really grateful to them for their support. That's all you have to say.
So from that standpoint, if the brand is not a sponsor
Hmm.
per se, they're not paying me, but they're paying
Right.
me if you actually convert, so the affiliate side.
Mhm.
Is there certain language that a person has to use? Because I'm going like, "Hey, this is sponsored by," but it's technically not, but I wanna make my show feel like I have a sponsor and it feels
Yeah.
bigger than it is. Is there something I have to do on that?
I think that no, I don't think there's any specific language you have to use. I mean, saying
Great.
sponsored by implies a certain kind of a relationship that probably isn't there when it's an affiliate link. But I think it's fine to just say, we have a really nice arrangement with XYZ company who have agreed to give us a small commission on sales when you purchase using the link that we're going to put in our show notes. So we're really grateful for that, and can't say enough nice things about the company.
There you
Yeah.
go. I love
It's
it.
pretty easy to do it organically in a way that sounds conversational and friendly, I guess you could say.
No, I mean that's it. We've all heard the host read ads where it's like this sounds like an ad, probably because the
Mhm.
brand is making them say X, Y, and Z. And
Right.
the best ads are those that sound really natural,
Mhm.
that get integrated into the show, become the content. I mean,
Mhm.
this is what I tell anyone that's watching this and listening to this, like rss.com. We've got an affiliate program. If you're
Yeah.
hosting with rss.com, they should be a sponsor of your show. Going, this show is hosted on rss.com, and
Mhm.
here's my affiliate link. And if you're looking to start a podcast, like go ahead and sign up with my link and start hosting. And there you got a great staff and yada yada. And there you go.
And when you use this coupon code that I'm providing you with from their courtesy, then, everybody wins.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah,
Exactly.
that's great. Yeah. Be sure to ask for Greg.
Hey, see me in the community. There you go. There you go. Um, I don't think I'm missing any questions, but if anyone's got questions that's in here, please put them in there. Is there anything else I'm missing on the affiliate sponsor disclosure side of things?
Not so much on that side of things. One question I get a lot about, well, there's a few questions. We haven't talked about music and clips and things like that.
Yep.
But one of the questions that I get a lot of is, do I need an LLC or a corporation for my podcast?
Okay.
And my answer is, again, it depends. It sort of depends on where you are financially, where you are geographically, because some places it's more expensive to have an LLC than it is in other, depending on what state you're in. For example, here in California, it's very costly. And oftentimes it just doesn't make financial sense until the show is generating lots of revenue. But an LLC is really good because it can insulate you from liability for the things that happen on or in your show. It can allow you to create that podcast prenup kind of an agreement with your co-hosts, your co-producers, because everybody becomes a member of the LLC under the operating agreement that outlines the roles and relationships. It also lets you raise financing if you need to get investors or something like that. And there are some tax advantages to having a business entity that can write off certain expenses that we ordinary individual mortals can't. So, there are lots of good reasons to do it, but you have to do the cost benefit analysis, and really, there's no answer but to talk to a lawyer, talk to an accountant who can really analyze whether or not it's going to be beneficial or not for you.
So you're saying the fact that RSS.com allows people to start monetizing after 10 downloads. You're like, great, I can start making income right
Mhm.
away. So the cost benefit of what's the write off of having an LLC and the fact that at least I've got income coming in because like
Right.
that's always, and then you start talking about your affiliate codes and affiliate links and you can start
Yeah.
making some money. But it's, as you said, the cost benefit side of it.
If the savings that you realize from having the LLC exceed the income that you would be generating, I'm sorry, exceed the cost of running the LLC,
Yeah.
then it's worthwhile. So you making enough income to justify the expense because of the savings and other benefits that you get, then yes. But it's not an easy equation. You really have to ponder it and think it through. So
I got one question here going back to the
yep.
affiliate side.
Mhm.
Is it good enough to say we're supported by affiliate partnerships? Would that work? I assume so.
No, I think that's not conspicuous enough and
Ooh.
adjacent enough. Um, I think that if you are, again, it has to be adjacent to the message. So if you say when you buy, oh sorry, so if you say, hey, I love this microphone and I'm using it on my podcast and I've got a link to it in Amazon, then you haven't met the requirement because you haven't said, and when you use my link, I will get paid. So,
So if I
no.
said we're supported by our affiliate partnerships, such as I have got this mic, here's my link to buy it. I'm throwing in more there.
Yeah, you might do something like in the show notes, maybe you'd say, buy from our affiliate, use our affiliate links when you buy, and we will see a little commission on the sale, and we appreciate it. And then you can just list them all. But if you just make a blanket statement, there was a friend, actually, a client of mine, who was doing something similar, just saying some of our links above may be affiliate links, and that doesn't tell us enough information.
Mm.
So, um, unless you're going to go to the trouble of explaining what affiliate partnership means, and most of our audiences don't know or care about that, unless they're also internet marketers. So,
All right, well, we've got two major content topics to continue to go through. So
yeah.
let's go to the next one. And
Mhm.
you alluded to it, music royalty, and we've got a question in there already. So um, we've all heard people getting taken down because by
Yeah.
other platforms because of music. I know there's a huge podcast network out there with most of their shows all in the music space, and I'm always wondering, like,
Mhm.
how much money are they spending to be able to play this music, right? So, like, talk to me. What is it that I need to think about, not only for a popular song that I want to play in there and talk about it from that, but also my intro music and any other music that I'm throwing throughout the episode.
Well, there are so many different permutations of what can go on here. One is that you want to use a particular track as the opening theme for your show. Back in the early days, everybody wanted to use the opening lick from AC/DC Back in Black as the opener of their show. Bum, ba-da-da. You know, I won't sing anymore. I'm going to spare your audience.
He also does
But
karaoke. Come on.
yeah, right. But yeah, so that is the kind of thing that absolutely needs permission, because there's a licensing industry around music for this kind of thing. So you need permission for that. Likewise, if you're using music as sort of an underbed uh, of the content of the show, just as underscoring, or to accent a point or something like that. Same thing. If you're not transforming that music, if you're just using it to enhance, to sort of decorate the show, you're going to need permission from the copyright owner. So copyright is an interesting thing because, as I said earlier, when one person creates it as an independent, they own it. Likewise, when two or more people create something, they own it jointly. And so most of the stuff that we want to use in our show, a clip of audio, a clip of video, a piece of poetry, or reciting from a text of a book or something, all of that is protected under copyright law, and that means that the owner has the exclusive right to copy, distribute, perform, display, and make things based on or derived from the original. So that's what copyright is. So you need permission from the owners of the musical composition, the songwriters, and the publisher, and you need permission from the record label that owns the recording to the song. Um, so two permissions right there, and two different sets of rights you need. So it's sort of four-stop shopping just to get a music license. So I generally am recommending to folks, use royalty-free music that just pay for it once, and don't worry about it. Be wary, because not all royalty-free music is created equal. Some of them, it's a per-use license fee, and some of it's a subscription, or once you've bought it and downloaded it, you can use it over and over again. So you need to read those terms of use really carefully.
I'm glad you
But
brought that up because that was literally the question we've got here is
ah,
uh, the concern about royalty-free music and
uh-huh,
wondering, am I going to get in trouble with it? And I think the answer there is royalty-free music. It's legit. Just read the terms in terms
yeah,
of what is the royalty you have access to
yeah,
on the
yeah.
music.
There are a couple of them out there that I really like, and both of the ones I'm going to mention are subscription based. So as long as you remain a subscriber, anything you produce during that time frame is grandfathered in. Anything that's in their catalog you can use. One of them is Epidemic Sound. It's great. It's 16, $17 a month or something like that. And they've got access to this giant library of music that's lots of different sounds and vibes and sound effects and things as well. The other one is story blocks, I believe it's called. That it's not just music, but like video clips and things like that, where you can get, and it's similar. It's a subscription that, as long as you're a subscriber, you use what's in the catalog and include it in your show. And then you just they have a way that you tell them about your channels, and then they don't do takedowns and flag infringements and things. So if they know that's a YouTube channel that belongs to one of our customers, they just hands off with that YouTube channel, for example. So it's pretty slick approach and relatively cost effective. Um,
Well, to that point, and it was a question someone just asked, but
yeah.
I thought of myself. So if
Mhm.
I stop paying the $16 a month, do I have to
Mhm.
take down my?
No,
Okay,
no, that's what I mean by grandfathered. So anything you create while you're a subscriber, you have permission for forever.
okay,
Just don't create anything new using that material after your subscription lapses.
gotcha. So 3 years from now, my back catalog, we're good because I
Yeah,
was paying for it at that point. So,
yeah.
that
Yeah,
is,
maybe you decide to retire your show and there's no
yeah,
point in paying for the license anymore, but all those old episodes can stay up and online and you don't have to worry about it.
awesome.
Yeah. Although I have seen a situation where somebody was a subscriber to one of them and the company changed hands, and then the the subscription didn't change hands or something, and so now it was the the wrong company was the licensee under the, yeah, so but that was just,
An
stupid
outlier.
lawyer
Yeah,
tricks. So one other scenario that you mentioned in asking about music, if you don't mind, Greg, is
please.
the scenario where you're talking about the song, right? Uh, Maybe you're doing music reviews, you're reviewing the album or the video or whatever, the TV show, and you're using clips. That falls into an area that the phrase for fair use is thrown around quite a lot, and a lot of people know the term, but don't really know what it means. So,
Guilty.
as I said, yeah, right. So, let me cover it really briefly. So, in the U.S., we have freedom of speech under the First Amendment of our Constitution. Free speech, free press. That means that when you make a law that says you can't use that thing that you want to use, you can't play that song in your podcast. Well, guess what? Isn't that an abridgment of my right of free speech? So the thing is that copyright law is also enshrined in the Constitution. So we have this inherent conflict that needs to be addressed. So the courts, starting in the mid 1900s, early 1900s, started addressing this and created this defense to claims of infringement based on the First Amendment called fair use. Basically saying that under certain circumstances, we are going to allow what would otherwise be an infringement of the copyright when it sort of supports a public policy favoring free speech. So we have to look at four balancing factors, you could say. What's the purpose and character of the infringing work? What's the nature of the original work? What's the amount and substantiality of the portion that's been used without permission? And then the fourth factor is the impact or effect on the value of the original or the market for the original. So here, when it's music, we have a very robust marketplace for music licensing. So the impact on the value is always going to be fairly high. So maybe using just a tiny little snippet of a piece of music, or it's not a very substantial part of the song, or something like that. And the real question is, are you somehow transforming the nature of that original? So if you're talking about a song in a music review where you're sort of doing a documentary analysis of the song, that's very different. It's educational and informational than just being a substitute experience. Hey, listen, let's listen to the song, right? So that might be fair use, it might not. Mostly, I think mostly review shows tend to land as fair use, and we don't hear about a lot of copyright owners going after them. However, there's a guy on YouTube who does these very detailed, complex breakdowns of pop songs. His name is Rick Beato. Um, and I think he's a drum guy originally, but he does these deep dive analyses, and he keeps getting YouTube strikes, content strikes against his stuff, and having to fight them. And he's got lawyers involved and spending, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars defending himself, so his channel doesn't get taken away. So there is a scenario where it isn't fair use, or you may have to fight to prove it's fair use. So you got to choose your battles. It's a defense to copyright infringement, and that means that someone's either suing you or making a claim, and you got to defend it. So that's why I generally recommend just pay for the music you're going to use, and don't expect to be using the latest from the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, or well, the latest from the Beatles. That's weird, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The
Basically,
latest Dua
use
Lipa
your
song
use your
isn't
discretion here and know that if something does happen, if you do
right.
get a legal takedown request, it's probably justified. At the same time, we've
Yeah.
seen it, and I've seen it a
Mhm.
lot, which is why RSS.com, we're big proponents of, hey, if you get taken down from Spotify or YouTube as because of their
Mhm.
own technology, their own views
Mhm.
of rights and so forth, like that's going to happen, and you're going to spend the time trying to fight it, and most of the time it's very difficult to do that.
Mhm.
So know that you may not get taken down from other listing platforms, but those
Right.
two may, just based on their own contracts with music companies and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and as you mentioned, the technology, right? YouTube has the content ID system, and Spotify has a similar program that sort of algorithmically goes through and looks for music and just sort of deletes episodes from time to
Yeah.
time. They don't even ask or give you an alert. I think they do have to give you some kind of an alert that it's been taken down, but it is what it is. But other hosting companies like RSS, like like not Spotify, like iHeart, these other companies have um, they have to protect themselves against being sued for the contributory infringement because they're participating in the distribution of that allegedly infringing material. So the way the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, works is that if somebody sends a notice to the company, hey, this piece of stuff on your service is infringing of my thing here, so take it down. The company is insulated from lawsuits. It's what we call a safe harbor from these lawsuits, as long as they have a policy for taking it down and they follow the law about how to do that, and that gives the alleged infringer a chance to repost the material, get it put back up by sending a counter notification. It's sort of complicated stuff, but um, that's why these companies are taking stuff down, is because they kind of have to if they don't want to get sued. Um, we can debate all day long whether or not it really works or not, but it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole if you're the owner of the copyright. So
Well, last topic here in the last few minutes, and we could keep talking about this, but this is why you've got your resources on your website, and this is why
sure.
people should pay attention. But the last one is I start speaking poorly about Gordon on my podcast. Right? I should be able to say whatever I want. I mean, it's a
Join the
podcast,
club,
right?
Greg.
Like we can put false lies, we can do
Yeah,
defamation. Yeah. So let's talk about the defamation liable and what kind of what do we have to
yeah.
worry about with our podcast and what we do and don't say.
Well, leaving aside the aphorism that there's no such thing as bad publicity, there is such a thing as bad publicity. When somebody comes out and says something false that's harmful to the reputation, that is what we call libel. Libel is the digital transmitted published version of defamation. The oral exchange of the same information would be called slander, just for people's clarity. So defamation is a false statement about a person that causes them harm to their reputation or their standing in the community. And yeah, that you got to be careful if you are creating content where you're talking about people or talking about people, even sort of in the abstract, the president of that company, not naming the person. Still possible to identify who is the president of that company, right? So if your information is false, you could be liable for the harm that causes. So that means you have to fact check. You have to verify that everything that is said that could potentially be harmful, and sometimes that's sort of a hidden target. You have to fact check, right? So yeah, that's sort of the basic message. Have multiple sources that corroborate what you're saying, that kind of thing. And be careful as a host. If your guest comes on and says so and so is a pedophile, you better be able to show that they were convicted of a crime of pedophilia if you're going to call them that. Calling somebody a psychopath, well, that's a psychological diagnosis, but again, is it real or is it Memorex? So do the fact checking as much as you can. When you are talking to a guest and they say something controversial, call them out on it. Wow, that's quite a statement. Where do you have support for that, or is this just an opinion? And give them a chance to couch it as their opinion, because opinion is genuinely truthful held view of something, and that's protected speech. You're allowed to have your opinion and even to tell people what your opinion is, as long as you're not telling it as a fact. So,
So if you said something like that, as the
mhm,
host of the show, are they coming after me for bringing someone on to my show who I can't control what this person says? Or
yeah.
is it, yes, you can't control what they say, but you could control, did you put that episode up? Did you put that information out?
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If a journalist wrote something false about you in the New York Times and it harmed your reputation, would you sue the journalist or would you sue the New York Times?
New York Times.
You'd sue them both.
Okay.
The publisher is liable for publishing the harmful information. Now, there are exceptions and defenses for bona fide media companies, and I think we as podcasters could take advantage of some of those, where we'd have to prove more than mere negligence in order to make a claim against a podcast or a news media or something like that. And when the person we're talking about is a public figure or a public official, they have to prove an extra element, and that is that the statement was published without with knowing knowledge of the falsity or reckless disregard. That's what we call actual malice. So when you're talking about the president or your congressman or the sheriff of your town or something like that, they have a little extra hurdle to get over to prove a case of defamation. It makes it pretty hard to prove you knew or should have known that it was false.
Sweet. Well, we've covered a lot here. Is there
We
anything in the
have.
last few minutes that that you want to leave anyone that's either paying attention now or watching this in review? Right?
Yeah, well, I think I want to just come back to this notion of injecting a dose of professionalism into everything we do. And my mission in life is to help creators get their messages out so they can have the impact and the influence that they want and achieve some income that they want as well. And the way to do that, I suggest, I will tell you, is to get your legal and business affairs things taken care of as early as possible. Get squared away, have a system in place for protecting your intellectual property, for onboarding your team, for making contracts with the folks that you need to make contracts with, and just a structure for the business, that LLC or that corporation, if it makes sense, or if nothing else, having a partnership contract with your co-producer or something like that. So systems is really the answer to that, and I can tell you more about systems if you like.
I love the fact that you hammered that even coming at it from a legal lens, Gordon's coming at it with the same lens that you should be thinking about systems,
Hmm.
process, strategy. And if you have and I know we stress you've heard this probably 1,000 times in the sense of just hit play, just hit record and get something out there. You're overthinking, but there is something to be said about having your systems, your process, your strategies in place because they'll protect you. They'll also make things easier. And it'll probably stop you from fading in the long term because you've got a system in place. So, with that, Gordon, last thing, I guess, I know you've said it, but where can
Yeah.
people find you?
Well, my name is an easy one to remember. So go to gordonfiremark.com. That is where I have all of my online courses, my legal forms and templates, uh, my free training and stuff like that. You can find me on YouTube and most social media as G Firemark. I think Instagram, it's my full name, Gordon Firemark, because nothing's ever easy. And and then if you're interested in my podcasts, tune into my YouTube weekly podcast on Thursday afternoons, Legit Podcast Pro, where I share some short tips for creators to learn more about this kind of stuff we've been talking about today. And my old show, long running show, 16 plus years in the works, is called Entertainment Law Update, and you can find that on all the usual places.
Amazing. Well, Gordon, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And everyone that's watching, thank you guys for spending the time making it all the way here to the end because we filled an hour with a lot of information. And we'll be having a lot of resources. But once again, rss.com is the place to come to start your podcast, to monetize. And we thank you for this. And we'll have our next training going on in the next month. So with that, we'll sign off and thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Likewise.